From the humble barn to the exotic flying machine, advertisers have put their messages anywhere the buying public just might look, continuously employing images that captivate, motivate, and sell. Coming up, advertising invades the home as radios are welcomed into our living rooms. Sell and Spin, a history of advertising, will be back here on the History Channel. We now return to Sell and Spin, a history of advertising, here on the History Channel. The sounds of radio. This talking box first started chattering on November 2nd, 1920.
This is KDKA of the Westinghouse Electric and Manufacturing Company in East Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. We shall now broadcast the election returns.
That was the results of the Harding-Cox campaign, and as we all know, Harding was the victor. People found out that night. They didn't have to wait until the newspaper came out.
KDKA.
For the first time, presidential election results were quickly available to radio listeners. But nobody really knew who, if anyone, was actually listening.
We'd appreciate it if anyone hearing this broadcast would communicate with us, as we are very anxious to know how far the broadcast is reaching.
Apparently, somebody out there was listening. Within 2 years, over 400 radio stations had sprung up around the country. In these early days, radio programming was presented without commercial interruption.
It never occurred to the first owners of the radio business, by which I basically mean Westinghouse and General Electric, to make radio an advertising-based business. They thought back in 1920 that their main aim ought to be to sell radio sets. So it wasn't advertising they were trying to sell, it was radios themselves.
However, radio broadcasters were soon in a quandary. They were starved for programming with no way to pay for it. The sales of the radio sets didn't provide a sufficient stream of income, and there was no practical method for charging the listeners. In many countries, governments eventually assumed the role of both broadcaster and producer of programming, but this was anathema to capitalist America.
In this country, because of our tradition of what's called free enterprise, the decision was made that these businesses should be allowed to compete in the marketplace and be as commercial as the other media have traditionally been.
To hear another concert with the NBC Symphony Orchestra.
Following the path forged by newspapers and magazines, radio stations turned to those willing to pay for access to the audience, advertisers. In August 1922, the first radio commercial ever was broadcast by station WEAF in New York City. It was a 10-minute advertisement for a real estate company.
The Queensboro Corporation has named its latest group of high-grade dwellings Hawthorne Court.
And they did 10 of these, cost them $500, and at the end of a few months, they had sold $127,000 worth of property. That's quite a return on a pretty modest investment. That was the beginning of the commercialization of radio.
It was kind of like a train leaving the station. Once it started, the effectiveness of it in reaching the American people was well understood, and the train just kept gaining momentum and momentum.
Manufacturers understood the benefits of having an advertising medium right in the consumer's living rooms.
Certainly you could send a printed magazine in, but the consumer usually had to do something. With radio, all the consumer had to do was to turn the dial on, and whatever came through the airwaves, they then heard.
Radio has been called the theater of the mind, where imaginations are set free by evocative narrative and the artful use of sound.
Someone coming. Park Patrol. Quick, kiss me. be stupid. Kiss me. They won't suspect anything.
Oh, yes, of course.
These same techniques were used by advertisers, who believed that hearing the commercial message increased retention of the product.
The presence of sound, the ability to add on certain kinds of dramatic features gave, I think, an entirely new dimension to publicity, to promotional activities, to efforts at persuasion.
Mushroom flavor fills every spoonful. Why not try Campbell's Cream of Mushroom Soup tomorrow?
As a means to sell their product, advertisers started producing and paying for entire radio shows.
Rinso presents Big Sister.
What they wanted to do was develop radio shows that were enormously popular, which would mention the sponsor as often as possible in the same breath with the name of the show. So people would associate a show that they liked with a particular advertiser.
Yes, there's the clock in Glen Falls Town Hall, telling us it's time for Rinso's story of Big Sister.
By the end of the 1920s, most national radio shows were the property of a single sponsor. And the first really successful radio program was Amos and Andy.
Hello there, boys. Say, Andy, you want to go into business?
Well, if the proposition is attractive enough, I might research.
A transplant from vaudeville, the show was the creative offspring of Freeman Gosden, who played Amos, and Charles Correll, who was Andy. In these less sensitive times, the white duo portrayed a variety of African-American characters speaking in dialect. Lever Brothers pegged it as the perfect advertising vehicle for its Pepsodent toothpaste, successfully marrying its name to the show, which premiered in August 1929.
And within 7 months, the Lever Brothers stock had gone up 300%.
With limited entertainment choices in the 20s and 30s, the humor of Amos and Andy captivated the audience, the buyers.
Everything would stop. Elevators would stop running, phones would stop ringing, toilets would stop flushing. In the summertime, if it was warm, someone could walk down the street when the windows of all the homes were open, you could hear the whole show. That kind of thing doesn't go on anymore. There's so much stuff out there now. There's so many shows and so many things to watch that you don't see that kind of mass attention to one product like that anymore.
One night on the show, Andy complained on air that he needed a pencil.
And in about 10 days, he was sent 3.5 million pencils by listeners. You can imagine what would happen 5 nights a week if you told everybody to go down and use Pepsi. So everybody was very happy about that, especially Lever Brothers.
Advertisers continued to develop ways to reach audiences, and one important audience they targeted was kids.
When I was a kid growing up in the middle of Indiana, I used to listen to the Jack Armstrong program on radio and the singers singing the great Wheaties jingle.
Won't you try Wheaties, for wheat is the best food of man.
Wheaties was the first company to use a jingle on the radio, combining the poetry of advertising with music. The jingle echoed its way into the consciousness of kids everywhere.
Have you tried Wheaties? They're whole wheat with all of the bran, and you can remember it years and years later.
While advertisers did well with the kids, their main goal was to hit the mother lode of buying power, the housewife. Advertisers knew her main concern was, of course, getting the clothes clean.
For a wash that's deep clean, sparkling clean, use Deep Cleaning Oxidol.
Oxidol is deep cleaning, deep cleaning, deep cleaning.
Their technique for getting to these women? The soap opera.
Oxidol's own Ma Perkins.
We call them soap operas today because of the Procter & Gamble's and the Oxidols and people like that were using this medium to get to the American housewife and say, if you use our soap, your clothes are going to be cleaner.
Ladies, you've heard a lot of interesting promises about wash day products recently, but today I promise you the wash day surprise of your life. A wash so dazzling clean you'll have to rub your eyes to believe it.
In 1938, radio overtook magazines as the #1 advertising medium. By the end of the decade, radio's share of advertising expenditures reached $130 million. But radio's place at the advertising trough would not be secure forever. The winds of the coming television age would eventually cool the white-hot medium of radio.
Well, never have the fortunes of the family been lower.
When we return, television mesmerizes the masses, and a new generation of advertisers transforms the art of the pitch. Sell and Spin, a history of advertising, will continue here on the History Channel.
Nothing says lovin' like some...
We now return to Sell and Spin, a history of advertising, here on the History Channel. Television. No other medium has contributed more to the explosive growth of advertising. TV's impact as a salesman is both cheered and bemoaned.
If you're selling a product which you can draw attention to by emotion, then television, nothing can beat it.
Want my Coke?
It's so immediate.
Really, you can have it.
It's so powerful, and it is so close to human response. You don't think about it, you see it, you associate what you see near it, and you say, I want it.
Hey, kid. Wow, thanks, Mean Joe.
Although television was invented in 1927 and made a guest appearance at the 1939 New York World's Fair, America would have to wait until after World War II to invite this new guest into its living room. In 1946, there were fewer than 10,000 television sets in the United States, and virtually none elsewhere in the world. 5 years later, nearly 10 million TVs had been sold.
We admire wieners, Oscar Mayer wieners, the best you ever put in buns.
Having emerged victorious from the battle over the commercialization of radio, advertising supported television from the start.
I'd like a package of those delicious, mild Camel cigarettes.
Unquestionably, she's being paid by the sponsor.
Advertisers realized that they already had program content from radio, and they'd simply pick it up, put it in pictures, and now transmit it to a cathode tube. You'd have a soap opera over here in radio, and you'd simply fill it in with real people on TV.
See the USA in your Chevrolet. America's asking you to call.
As in radio, advertisers owned television programs, associating their names with popular shows and stars. In those early days, advertisers had enormous influence on the television industry. During the McCarthy era, the fear of being soft on communism led advertisers to create a blacklist. Lives were ruined.
Certain individuals were rightly or wrongly identified as sympathizers or members of the Communist Party and were forbidden to work. The advertisers pay the bills. And so if an advertiser chooses to exercise influence, they can tell the networks who can work and who can't work.
The influence also extended into who the winning contestants should be on some quiz shows that aired in the 1950s.
Some of the most popular quiz shows, it turned out, were fixed, as many people know. Most people don't know. They were fixed because of the pressures exerted on the production company by the advertiser of those shows.
The more charismatic, good-looking contestants were secretly provided with the answers ensuring their success. The dividends were increased viewership and wider exposure for the sponsor's products. When the scandal was revealed in 1959, the very nature of the way television was produced and presented changed forever.
After the quiz show scandals, the networks took over from the advertisers. They took charge of all the TV time and doled it out, sold it minute by minute to advertisers.
Driven by a profit-oriented businessman, early TV ads were full of simplistic, repetitious boasts.
Dip, dab, dip, dab, dip.
The most common technique, the hard sell.
The remarkable new Hot Point Super Automatic. It not only bakes automatically, it even boils automatically, fries automatically.
It's advertising that was very direct and strident and repeated the same phraseology over and over and over again.
You can even barbecue automatically.
That automatic barbecue is marvelous.
So that he or she could go to the store and robot-like reach out for that product and pick it up off the shelf.
Mr. Clean, Mr. Clean, Mr. Clean.
And advertising's undisputed master of the hard sell was Rosser Reeves of the Ted Bates Agency.
Rosser Reeves developed that advertising in a period when you couldn't avoid the advertising. And by that I mean, we didn't have remote controls. We had a few magazines. We had 3 television networks. Rosser Reeves developed advertising when you could literally irritate your way into people's consciousness.
Poor Marge. She'll never hold a man until she does something about her breath. Until she does something about her breath. Does something about her breath.
Reeves devised a concept which he called the unique selling proposition, a method reminiscent of the advertising done at the beginning of the 20th century.
Unique selling proposition is very close to reason why. Once again, it's an attempt to take machine-made objects and to say that this machine-made object is different from another exactly similar machine-made object.
Reeves' strategy was to repeat the unique selling proposition endlessly, proving that countless exposures to a catchline increases retention.
Wonder Bread builds strong bodies 12 ways.
The drip, drip, drip of stomach acid.
Anacin brings fast, fast, fast relief.
The Anacin campaign remains one of Rosser Reeves' most memorable and most effective. Combined on TV, the strong words and unpleasant images had a very powerful effect.
Mommy, Mommy, look what I built! Jimmy, please, not now, I'm too busy.
He had hammers hitting on the head for a headache, and they would show the sort of chemistry of a headache.
There were lightning bolts and all sorts of other gruesome devices, and those were supposed to dramatize pain and tension and all these other horrible, horrible things that befell the poor human being.
Anacin could cure the headache the way no other formulation could, and the hammers really hit home.
Within just 6 months of the initial airing of the campaign, sales of Anacin tripled from $17 million to $54 million.
It was the kind of commercial that people could not possibly like. Reeves understood that that was the whole point. You know, it associated the product in a positive way with the pain of a headache. So that when you went to the store, you'd think, you know, how can I get rid of a really annoying headache like this? I'll buy Anacin.
In the late 1950s and early 60s, a new America was watching TV.
Cool it, baby.
The viewers had become more sophisticated. The advertising reflected this change back at them. A new breed of ad men and women were forging a creative revolution.
Wow, what's that aftershave you're wearing?
Your high karate aftershave is so powerful, it drives women right out of their minds.
They came up with a new way of communicating that sort of acknowledged that you had a brain and that you could look at these images differently and that you didn't need to hear it 100 times. You'd like it better.